Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabaz. As ever, I am the IT Geek. I'm a very hot and bothered IT Geek today. For those living in the UK, you'll understand how hot it actually is in this country right now. 30 plus, and it's so hot. just sitting here, not even doing anything, and I'm breaking out into a sweat. My headphones are really uncomfortable. Sorry to gross everyone out. Sharing a bit too much maybe, but it's so uncomfortable. But as they say in the movies, the show must go on. And yeah, we are back with another SC300 exam prep video. So we are deep into module 2, and we're still on the conditional access policies, planning, implementing and managing, and this is part 2 of that series. So again, you probably notice Dwayne is not showing up with me right now on screen. Bit of a scheduling conflict to do with me really. And we just had to record separately, so I'm recording the theory and Dwayne's done the labs. So you'll probably see Dwayne shortly at the end of the video doing his lab and demo. It's only for a few videos, so 3 or 4 videos, and then we'll be back recording together and having our good banter, as they say. I'm missing Dwayne. And that good fun that we've been having recording so far. So again, thank you everyone for your ongoing support. Let's get started with this module. I believe this episode is episode 15 potentially. So I'm sure again they'll be in the description, so you can follow the episode numbers there. So again, I'm not going to introduce myself and Dwayne. We did that at the start of this module. You know who we are, hopefully by now. We are module 2. And specifically, this is the module is called Implement an Authentication and Access Management Solution. So let's look at what we can expect in this episode. So this is the Plan, Implement and Manage Conditional Access is part 2 of that. And start, we're going to look at test and troubleshoot conditional access policies. We're then going to move on to looking at implementing session management. And then we're going to do implementing a device enforced restrictions, which will lead us nicely onto the demo of configuring authentication session control. So let's get straight into looking at testing and troubleshooting conditional access policies. So let's look at configurations we should really try and avoid first of all, okay? So when we're dealing with all users and all cloud apps, I want to make sure we're not blocking everyone, okay? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'll be the first to admit I've actually done this embarrassingly quite recently, and it was a whole lot. Thank God it wasn't a production tenant, but again, after a lot of testing, and I made the mistake of not adding my break glass account, and I blocked access to all the admins, everybody in the tenancy. Luckily, it wasn't a production, but let's just be careful that we don't make that same mistake. Okay. So for users who haven't yet enrolled their device, the policy can block access, including access to Intune portal. So if you are an administrator without an enrolled device, the policy will block you from getting back into the portal. So let's try and avoid requiring the device to be marked as compliant. Because again, there are a lot of situations where you might need to try and access without a compliant device, and it can cause some problems. So, there is a policy to require hybrid Azure AD joined devices. So this access blocking device also has the potential to block, all users in your organization who don't have a hybrid device. There might be a business reason for that. So again, let's try and avoid that with all users. We can do it with specific users maybe, but let's try and avoid it, making sure we don't block everybody. Requiring the app protection policy as well. So again, especially on the all users and all the app clouds, this is another access blocking policy, and it has the potential to block access for all users in your organization that don't have an Intune policy. So if you're an administrator without a client application that has Intune app protection policy, this policy blocks you from getting into portals such as Intune or Azure as well. So again, let's try and avoid that. The final sort of policy that I wanted to touch on, this is for blocking access for all users, all cloud apps, and all devices. So this configuration blocks your entire organization essentially. So again, let's not try and avoid that, because again, it's asking for trouble, and unfortunately, if you block everybody out, it can be very difficult, especially getting with Microsoft are great. Don't get me wrong. They also have a lot of things that frustrate me about them, and this is one of them. It can take weeks sometimes, and there's a lot of to and back and forth required. to try and get back into your tenancy. So try and avoid doing this. I don't recommend it. I've been in that position. So let's look at reviewing some of the errors. So that the first one is a conditional access sign interrupt. So this is the first way to review the error messages that appear for problems with signing in when you're using the web browser, for example. The error page itself has detailed information. This information alone can describe what the problem is and the sort of suggested solution. So we can, if we look at that, this is what the page looks like, and as you can see, it tells you that the application contains sensitive information. It tells you devices or applications don't meet the compliance policy. Again, it tells you where you can learn more information, and again more details as well at the bottom there. So the message states that the application can only be accessed from devices or client applications, that meet the company's mobile device management policy. So straight away we need to look at that. So again, quite a detailed error message there when you try and log in. So also we have Azure AD sign-in events as well. So this is the second method to get detailed information about sign-in and sign interruption specifically. And it's to review that you review that Azure AD sign events to see which conditional access policy or policies were applied and why, for example. And again, this is the sort of page you can find more information. You can find more information about the problem by clicking on more details at the bottom there you see in red. And by clicking the more details, it will reveal the troubleshooting information that's helpful when you try to search in Azure AD events. So use the event ID and lots of information. It's something, again, if you're logging a ticket with Microsoft, you can give them this information as well. And they do ask for this information, funnily enough. So very important to kind of take a snippet of that. Let's talk about implementing session management, and then we should be nearly ready for the demo. So in complex deployments, organizations might have the need to restrict authentication sessions. Some of those scenarios may include accessing resources from an unmanaged device. So again, if you've got your personal device that's not managed by the corporate entity or is not enrolled into Intune, you might need to restrict access to those devices. Critical business applications, you might need to restrict access to those because, again, for example, a HR app, you might only want people from HR, or a finance app like Sage, you might only want people in the finance team accessing that. So, again, an example there where you can implement session management and restrict access to the application. Again, high priority users, you might have some of your board members that you need to sort of restrict authentication sessions with. So again, especially with your upper level management, this might be a requirement. So again, this can be done for implementation session management. Again, another scenario is externally accessing sensitive resources. So again, if you're outside the corporate network, you're not on VPN, etc., you can use session management to restrict authentication sessions for anyone who's external to your network, accessing any sort of resources like finance or HR. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about user sign-in frequency. So sign-in frequency defines a time period before a user is asked to sign in again. So again, depending on your security policy within your organization, this can be set to have to sign in every day or once a week or whatever. With Azure AD, the default ruling is 90 days. So Azure AD default configuration, get my words out. Azure AD default configuration for user sign-in frequency is rolling 90-day window. Okay, so asking users for credentials often seems like sensible thing, make sure they're the right, they are who they say they are every day maybe. However, it can backfire if you do it too often. So users who are trained to enter their credentials without thinking can unintentionally supply them to malicious credentials prompts. So this is like a default is 90 days for that reason. Okay, so the default is to not ask for credentials if security posture has not changed. So Azure AD default configuration comes down to don't ask users to provide credentials if the security posture is the same. If their session hasn't changed, don't ask them again. So that's the default setting. You can change that obviously, but again, by default, Microsoft won't ask you if nothing's changed. That I like the saying, why change it if it's not broken, why change it? So Microsoft obviously agree with that. The final point around user sign-in frequency is that the sign-in frequency setting works with apps that have implemented OAuth 2 and OIDC. So these are two protocols according to the standards. So most Microsoft native apps for Windows, Mac, and mobile, including a lot of sort of the different sort of apps within Microsoft, comply with this setting. So for those who kind of know a bit more about Exchange, or OAuth 2 is used in the sort of more modern ways of authenticating. So yeah, good to know that the sort of user sign frequency works with both OAuth 2 and OIDC protocols. So just looking at user sign-in frequency, sign-in frequency setting works. We're still carrying on with user sign-in frequency. It works with sample applications as well. So as long as they don't drop their own cookies and are redirected back to the Azure AD for authentication on a regular basis. Okay. As well, we know the whole multi-factor authentication piece because we've covered that already. But sign-in frequency previously applied only to the first factor authentication for the user sign-in frequency on devices that were Azure AD joined, hybrid, Azure AD joined, and Azure AD registered. There's no easy way for our customers to reinforce MFA on those devices. So based on customer feedback, Microsoft sign-in frequency will apply for MFA as well. So that's all based on customer feedback. Okay. Moving on to looking at device identities. If you have an Azure AD joined, hybrid Azure AD joined, or an Azure AD registered device, when a user unblocks their device or signs in interactively, this event will satisfy the sign-in frequency policy as well. Okay, so good thing to know there about device identities. When we talk about validation, you can use the what if tool, so the tool is actually called what if, to simulate a sign-in from the user to target the application and other conditions based on how you've configured your policy. The authentication session management controls show up in the result of the tool. So again, this is like a validation tool, the what if tool, that really helps with your user sign-in frequency. Final thing to touch on is just your policy deployment. Okay, so to make sure that your policy works as expected, it's recommended, the best practice is to use that test option. And again, I think it's something that Dwayne will have covered in the demo. I think he said in one of his demos, that's how he always sets his policies to test. So it essentially verifies your policies working correctly. Okay, so always best practice to test first. So last part before we move on to the demo is looking at implementing device enforced restrictions. Okay, so we've got multiple device platform support, including iOS devices, Android devices, as well as Windows 10 and Windows 11 devices. For the sort of device enforced restrictions, you can enforce it so only devices that are compliant or meet certain compliance expectations can access your resources. So again, that's another sort of conditional access policy. You can mention it you shouldn't do it for all users because you could lock people out, but at least have for your main bulk of users, you should try and maybe enforce compliance. You can also filter for devices as well, which is with implementing device enforced restrictions for compliance policies and conditional access policies. So let's pass this on to Dwayne now, who's going to do a walkthrough demo. And if I'm not mistaken, the topic is going to be configuring authentication session control. So over to you, Dwayne.
Thanks, Shabaz, and welcome back to this demo. In this demo, we're going to talk about session control policies and how we can get those set up within conditional access. So we have our conditional access policies. I'm going to go to one of my demo policies here and show you what the session policies look like. So if we this is going to change a little bit here. All right. If I go down to session controls within this particular policy, this is where we set up those sessions, and these are a little bit setting up these session policies do different things within other services as well. So if we go into and take a look at these session controls, you can see we have the use app enforced restrictions. So you can see if we put this in place, various controls that are in place for Office 365, Exchange Online, and SharePoint Online can be, those restrictions can be tied into our sessions and our conditional access policies. So that's very helpful. Conditional access app controls a big one here, and setting up policies for blocking downloads or creating custom policies. You need to use this if you are using Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps as your cloud app security broker. You need to have this in place for the applications that you want to put access policies or session policies into your Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So very important, and we'll talk more about that, I think, in another section when we get into cloud app security brokers. Other things here, sign-in frequency. We can set up parameters around how frequently they sign in and when we're going to enforce this particular policy. Persistent browser sessions. If we want to allow this user for specific, when you have all cloud apps enabled, and we want to allow a user, over the course of maybe we don't, if they don't change their IP address and they're in a trusted location for consistently for a week, we are not going to require them to do enforce, say, MFA every time they log in. We can do that there. Customize continuous access. So we can do this for certain clients and evaluate what's going on with that client, and also then again exclude them from that particular policy based on those session rules. And that's really what the session parameter within conditional access does, is it sets up those rules and allows you to give a little bit more flexibility to the users based on where they're accessing, how often they're accessing, so that the policy doesn't always affect and create a level of aggravation to a user because they're constantly re-verifying themselves. If we set certain parameters and plan and decide what a typical user's workday is, and set these session policies to align with those, then they should only need to be in, these policies should only need to be enforced if the user deviates from that. So if they're if they are changing, accessing a different cloud app that they hadn't accessed recently, or maybe they go to lunch, take their laptop and log in from a Starbucks, those things are going to initiate that conditional access policy, because the session that they've been running on and that what's typical has changed. So it's going to cause that re-verification to trigger. So those are some things to take into account. Like I said, one of the key things in this particular session policy, the session control in here is the use conditional access app control to again, you can see you can block downloads within here. So we can around our cloud apps, if we want to make sure, if they're accessing a particular cloud app that has very sensitive information, we can actually put a session control in here to make sure they are not able to download any information from that cloud app. So very powerful tool there. And again, these app controls tie into Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps as well, but you do have some capabilities within conditional access policies to do a little bit more control over your app, other than just blocking access, authorizing access, or requiring MFA or password changes. Session controls give you a little bit more control over what takes place. So that ends this quick demo, just to understand the session controls within conditional access policies. So with that being said, I will pass it back to you, Shabaz. Thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne. Another great demo from Dwayne on session management controls. So I really appreciate that, Dwayne. And that brings us an end to this episode. So again, another action-packed episode, a lot of information in there. For those who have been following the whole series, thank you very much for your support. We do really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your likes and comments, and thank you for subscribing, of course. If you haven't subscribed, why not get subscribing? Our socials are available in the description. Mine and both Dwayne's. The most important thing, you can get a link to Dwayne's SC300 exam prep book as well by Pact. So Dwayne wrote a book on it, as I've probably mentioned a few times. I was a technical reviewer of that, so please buy that book, and why not follow along with the book when you're looking in doing the video series as well. So it'll be a great combination. There's also a link in the description to the GitHub labs as well, so you can follow those labs as Dwayne's doing them. So thank you very much everybody for watching. As I mentioned, please do keep on liking, commenting, and do subscribe if you've not. And we'll both see you in the next episode. So thank you, and until next time, goodbye.